Well, good afternoon and welcome to each and every one of you that took the time out of your Tuesday to join us for the next 2 hours for the most insightful, engaging, and exciting 2 hours of your day. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Shameen Johnson. I'm a business development officer here at the Grand Bahama Port Authority, and I will serve as your host moderator for our webinar today. So before we get started, I always like to have a little bit of fun, and this will include your participation, and I'm speaking to my panelists and my participants, all inclusive, because I want to start off with a little bit of an icebreaker activity. And so because we are talking about nearshoring, what these opportunities are, for the sake of some of the names that I personally invited, and I got a few questions. So what exactly is nearshoring? And we're going to delve into that a bit more, but for the sake of the game that we're about to play for our icebreaker, I just want to briefly state, and I will quote what nearshoring is. So nearshoring is a business strategy where a company outsources some of its business processes or services to a nearby country rather than a more distant location. So nearshoring is often chosen as an alternative to offshoring, which involves outsourcing to countries that are located far away, such as India or China. So in essence, nearshoring and Grand Bahama fit hand in hand for your business needs, and we're going to talk a bit about that. So now that we know in general what nearshoring is, our icebreaker involves your participation in typing in our Q&A panel the answer to this question. And the game is, who am I? So here we go. We're all ready. You're going to type the answer in to the statement that I'm about to read. This company has nearshored some of its customer service operations to Costa Rica. The company has been able to take advantage of the country's skilled workforce and favorable business environment and has been successful in providing high-quality customer support services to its clients. Now, let me just give you guys a hint, because that could be any organization. I can almost guarantee that everybody on this webinar uses this company in one form or the other. Who am I? Who is this company? You can type in your answer in our chat. Ms. Seymour, you got it. It is Amazon. Amazon, and we all have accounts. Yay! Even those of us that pay for accounts that we don't use as parents. That one was free because I'm doing that right now. One more before we go into our housekeeping rules. That was an easy one. Let me take it a step up. This organization nearshored some of its manufacturing operations to Mexico. The company has been able to reduce production costs by taking advantage of Mexico's lower labor costs while still maintaining control over its supply chain. So think about a company, and I'm not going to give a quick hint just yet. But again, I can almost guarantee that everybody that's participating on this webinar and even beyond has been able to take advantage in a very meaningful way what this company offers. Who am I? Any smarty pants in our chat right now? Has anybody traveled before by airplane? Not American Express. So your first clue was travel. We all travel. We all travel or have traveled. Bam, Mr. Newbold, you got it. It is Boeing. Congratulations. Thank you all so much. So I got a few more of our little icebreaker games that we will continue on with, but we're going to have fun, but we're going to be educated as well. And so before I move into the introduction of our first presenters, I just want to share a few of our housekeeping rules and ask that you please participate even in that area. And so the first, of course, is if you are using your cell phone or any other device, or if in your office and you have your phones off, we ask that you please either turn your cell phone off, put it on silent or vibrate, or if in your office, turn your volume down to the lowest it can go. Second, all of our questions and answer period will be at the end of our session. Now, I know that you will have tons of questions and we want to be able to answer all of them. And the only way that we can do that in a timely fashion is if you hold all of your questions until the end of our webinar today, and then we will be able to answer accordingly. And then third, it is lunchtime. So if you plan on sneaking a little something, you know, I'm not having lunch right now. So if you do plan on eating, don't share that with us just yet. Wait until after. But again, we are here to have fun. We are here to be engaged. We're here to learn and answer questions. And so again, welcome. So I'm gonna roll right into our first part of why we're here, and that is the introduction of our presenters. And so for the first part of our session, we have three beautiful human beings who I have had the opportunity to work with and know personally on several different levels. And I would want to take this opportunity right now to introduce that first person. And so our first presenter is that of Mr. Ian B.A. Roll. He is the president of the Grand Bahama Port Authority group of companies since February 2009. Born in Grand Bahama Island, Ian Roll considers himself as an entrepreneur at heart. He has a passion for the sustained economic advancement of Freeport, and he's excited to do that. And a part of that is what he will be sharing in the presentation today. Mr. Roll joined the Grand Bahama Port Authority as Group Financial Analyst in 2000 and served as Group Financial Controller. He most recently served as Chief Financial Officer of the group before, of course, his appointment as President. Mr. Roll is a member of the Bahamas Institute of Chartered Accountants, the Georgia Society of CPAs, and the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants. Mr. Roll is married to Barbara Roll, and they are the proud parents of Nia, Ian, Dana, and Jade. Ladies and gentlemen, our first presenter will be Mr. Ian Roll. Now I'm going to introduce everyone, so if you can please hold your online applause until I'm done. Our second presenter is that of Mr. Derek Newbold, and he is the Chief Investment Officer here at the Grand Bahama Port Authority. Derek holds a master's degree, in business administration with specialization in business strategy and certifications from the Ivy School of Business and Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. Derek Newbold is a business executive with demonstrated leadership experience in numerous corporations and industries. Again, another serial entrepreneur. He is a proprietor of several business ventures on several islands here in the Bahamas, spanning several industries. His passion for entrepreneurship and business has made him an exceptional candidate to develop and lead the Grand Bahama Port Authority and the phenomenal business development department. Of course, I'm a member of that group. In his current capacity as Chief Investment Officer at the Grand Bahama Port Authority Limited, he is responsible for research and analysis, management of customer relations and business development, marketing, promotions, investor programs for international as well as domestic investors through the GBPA promotional arm, Invest Grand Bahama. Mr. Newbold is the president of the Kingdom Business Empowerment Network, KBEN in Freeport, and is married to Harianne Newbold. Together, they are the proud parents of Hannah and Sky. And last but certainly not least, our final presenter for our first half of our session is that of Dr. Donovan E. Moxie. So Dr. Donovan is a proven business executive and technologist with a strong background in electrical engineering, microelectronics, and material science with over 20 years of experience working in the technology industry, including, new business startups, funded technology research, and a large multinational firm. Dr. Moxie has extensive experience, and he's an expert in the technology field, including commercialization, executive management, development, national and international strategic alliances and partnerships, as well as building management for a cross-section of teams. Dr. Moxie holds a PhD in materials science and engineering with concentration in electric materials science and auto-electronic devices from North Carolina State University. He holds a master's and a bachelor's of science degree in electrical engineering from North Carolina A&T State University, as well as Tennessee State University, respectively. Dr. Moxie is a graduate of the North Carolina State University Technology, Education, and Commercialization Program and the Ewing Marion Kaufman Foundation Fast Track Tech Venture Program. As I conclude, Dr. Moxie has also worked as a member of the technical staff with the Computer Aided Design Group at AT&T Bell Laboratories in Murray Hill, New Jersey, and that was in 1992. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you a phenomenal first session, which will be headed again by Mr. Roll, followed by Mr. Newbold, and concluded by Dr. Donovan Moxie, who will talk about why you should be investing in Grand Bahama for this nearshoring opportunity. Thank you so very much for your attention thus far.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Charmaine, for the introduction. It's indeed a pleasure to be here today to speak to the opportunities and the advantages that Freeport Grand Bahama offers to each of you on the call. I'm very excited about this place, love Grand Bahama, just relocated here in 1997 from another island in the Bahamas, and there are no regrets. So this is a wonderful place to do business. So I'll first start out by speaking to the location, because there are a number of persons on the call who may not know where Grand Bahama is. Grand Bahama is about 55 miles off the coast of South Florida, as you can see on the screen. From Palm Beach or Lauderdale or Miami to Freeport, Grand Bahama, it takes about 25 to 30 minutes. It's a quick trip up and down in an airline. And there are other means of transportation to get here as well, especially from Palm Beach. We have a cruise ship that comes every other day to the island of Grand Bahama. But it's a really easy place to get to. And I want to stress that it's almost onshore. We speak about nearshore. Freeport is almost onshore. So I also want to note that Freeport is a 230 square mile area. And we are located in a very favorable time zone. About 80% of the North American population probably falls within a 3-hour timeline between where we are in the Bahamas and where you are in the United States. About 80% are within a 3-hour time zone. So that's a significant advantage for you who want to bring your skilled labor from a very far away place to Freeport. Another thing I wanted to mention concerning Freeport is the creation of it. Freeport was created through an agreement called the Hawksbill Creek Agreement, dating back to 1955. And that agreement is between the government of the Bahamas and a private entity that we call the Grand Bahama Port Authority. And in that agreement, there were specific roles and responsibilities granted to this private company. The private company was given sovereign type of powers, administrative powers. And those significant responsibilities entail, one, the sole right to issue business licenses, the sole right to deal with all building and sanitary code compliance matters. We determine the planning, the zoning of the city. We are the regulators of utilities like the telecommunications, the power, the water company. We have responsibility for environmental compliance matters, city management and maintenance. And we also have a responsibility to promote the economic development of Grand Bahama. So based on all those responsibilities, we can safely say that Grand Bahama Port Authority, it's a one-stop shop for investment. And as we know, it's very cumbersome to deal with business in various parts of the world because responsibilities for permitting or business licensing are in different locations, and these different organizations and departments lack communication. But here we have it all in one house, one place. And so we're very pleased to also have Derek Newbold, our Chief Investment Officer, as the head of the Grand Bahama Investment Arm, which acts as a concierge service. So when you want to start your business in Grand Bahama, his team will hold your hand from beginning to end. So if you need your business license, he will guide you, his team guide you through the business licensing process. If you need a permit as a part of your construction of anything relating to your business, you fitting out your establishment, Derek's team will hold your hand and walk you through that process with other areas within the company. If you need land to build or lease your new business on, that's another area within the group of companies that his team will actually assist you to getting the necessary land, whether you lease it or purchase it. So we are a one-stop shop, and that is another advantage, significant advantage of doing business in Grand Bahama. Next slide, please, Derek. This is a significant asset to the island of Grand Bahama. Grand Bahama has at least 2 subsea optical fiber cables running from the US mainland into Freeport. And in certain places, these cables actually go between other islands in the Bahamas. So Freeport is a strategic place for this fiber connectivity. And this lends well to our broadband. We have fantastic broadband experiences here on the island. It's rare that we have issues with our connectivity. And I think that is very, very important for all those persons in the tech space, well, any space in that matter, because we're so reliant on internet service these days. Next slide, please. Another asset we have here in Grand Bahama, we have an 11,000-foot runway, and it's capable of actually servicing the largest aircraft in the world, which is a Russian Antonov. And that type of plane has landed here more than once, bringing significant assets and equipment to the island, because we also have a ship repair facility here, which is probably the largest in this particular region. So the airport is also going to go under some renovations, and there'll be new construction within the next few months, where the government of the Bahamas has committed to build a new terminal for the island of Grand Bahama, and we welcome that as well. Next slide. In that Hawksbill Creek agreement that I spoke of, that created the city of Freeport, it actually gave the Grand Bahama Port Authority group of companies and anyone we grant a business license to certain tax advantages. One, in the city of Freeport, there's no property tax, 0 property tax. There's no capital gains tax. And even if the government were to introduce a capital gains tax in the Bahamas, it wouldn't apply to this zone because of this special agreement that we have called the Hawksbill Creek Agreement. There are no taxes on your imports. So any goods that you want to bring in for your company is duty free. You want to bring in your vehicle, your table, your chairs, any type of equipment for your business. It's duty-free due to the fact that you now have this license from the Grand Bahama Port Authority. Repatriation of your profits. In other parts of the Bahamas, you pay a 5% tax when you repatriate your profits. But in Freeport, you pay 0% when you repatriate your profits. Again, a significant advantage of doing business here in Grand Bahama. And of course, you can have 100% foreign equity in your company for most businesses, although there are certain businesses like retail reserved for Bahamians. For the most part, you can own 100% as a foreigner of your company. Next slide, please. And Derek loved to show this particular slide. In 2016, we were awarded the Free Trade Zone of the Year in Latin America and the Caribbean. So we're very, very proud of that. And Derek and his team have done a tremendous job over the years to continue to add value to what we do and for others to actually take advantage of what Freeport offerings present. Next slide. There's a Commercial Enterprise Act that was created by the government, and it was created to assist with decreasing the minimum investment for foreign entities coming into the Bahamas. The bar was previously $500,000 plus, and it was thought that certain industries, we desired certain industries to be set up in Grand Bahama in particular. And for persons on this call who are in the tech space is one of the areas or sectors that will truly benefit from the Commercial Enterprise Act. So in the Commercial Enterprise Act, it allows an entity to invest $250,000 minimum, and you would then get your permits, your work permits processed in a very fast manner within 14 days. This also allows you to apply for something that we'll discuss more of today, your BH-1B visa, BH-1B visa, which is equivalent to the H-1B visa in North America. So once you qualify under the Commercial Enterprise Act, you then also qualify to apply for BH-1B visas for your employees. So some of the sectors that can benefit from this act are the tech companies, call centers, manufacturing or assembly sectors, the data storage and warehousing sector, maritime trade, the boutique health facilities, and the aviation sector. Next slide. And this is a program that was introduced by the government of the Bahamas called BEATS. And what that is, it allows persons to tiptoe, just put your toes in the water in the event that you don't want to make a long-term commitment to set up shop in Grand Bahama in particular. You are able to apply online to this program that we call BEATS. And it allows one to stay in country and work for a 1-year period. And the annual fee is $1,000 per person for the individual, and for your dependents, you pay $500, a $500 fee. And if you're a student wanting to study in the Bahamas for 1 year, you can also apply to the country for this BEATS program, and that's a $500 annual fee. Next slide. Great. So now I'll pass the presentation now over to my colleague, Mr. Derek Newbold, who's our Chief Investment Officer.
Thank you, Ian, and good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to take just a few minutes of your time to share a little on Freeport's economy and the economic outlook. Okay, Freeport's economy is considered to be the most diverse in the Bahamas, and it's anchored by two pillars. tourism, and industry. Our industrial sector spans a broad range of sectors like manufacturing, value addition and assembly, logistics and supply chain management, real estate development, and of course, tech and innovation. And these are just a few of the sectors that are actually functional here in Freeport. Over the next 12 to 24 months, you can expect to see a number of projects come on stream. And that will include investments in the maritime sector, the hospitality sector, upgrades to the Grand Bahama International Airport, financial services, healthcare sector, investments in the education sector, new manufacturing, real estate development, and of course, alternative energy. This is what those projects look like when placed on a map of the port-controlled area. The highlighted investments represents well in excess of $1 billion. And these are projects that have either entered the construction phase or have received a license approval, or in some instances are at the final review and approval stage. Now, this is the footprint of the entire build-out plan for the Western Atlantic University School of Medicine. The total investment at complete build-out will be around $200 million. Phase 1 is completed. The university is open, with students and faculty being here since January of last year. Also last year, we issued an approval for phase 2 of construction, which we expect to commence later this year. One of the major maritime investments that are taking place on Grand Bahama right now is a $350 million investment to provide the shipyard with access to new dry docks. With these new dry docks, Grand Bahama Shipyard will become one of the largest ship repair facilities in the world. And you can imagine the impact that's going to have in terms of job creation, as well as spin-off opportunities. Now here's a basic rendering of the Carnival Grand Port project. This project is estimated to cost somewhere in the region of 200 or 200 plus million. And it will have a transformational impact on the local economy as well. Carnival anticipates bringing somewhere around 1 million cruise passengers to our shores each year. This is an example of one of the ships that will be calling at the Grand Port, the Mardi Gras. It's the largest ship in Carnival's fleet. It's the XL class vessel, measures about 345 meters length overall, and has a passenger capacity of 6,600 passengers. Another major maritime investment that's taking place will be a joint venture project that's being undertaken by Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines and the ITM Group, where they intend to develop about 4 new cruise berths capable of accommodating the largest cruise ships in the world. Now, RCL is already committed to bringing about 250 new cruise calls, which will result in about 1.5 million new cruise visitors coming to our shores. And this project is also expected to have a transformational impact on the city of Freeport. This is an example of, or rendering of, a component of that project, because there's also going to be a retail component attached to this. They will accommodate the Icon and Oasis class vessels, also carrying a passenger capacity up to 6,600. And these ships are slightly larger at 350 meters length overall. The retail component will create entrepreneurial opportunities for locals here in Grand Bahama. When you couple the RCL project with Carnival's project, we can see that both of these projects together will actually result in somewhere in the region of 2 to 3 million cruise passengers visiting our shores each year. Now, we certainly plan to capitalize on that by launching an aggressive cruise conversion program with a view to converting as many of those passengers to stopover visitors, because there's a significant difference in visitor spend when you consider a cruise ship passenger or one-day passenger versus someone who's staying for an extended period. There will also be a huge demand for shore excursions and opportunities for capacity building. And on the retail and food and beverage side, we can expect demand to increase for more offerings in these areas as well. And this will ultimately create significant employment opportunities and have a positive impact on expanding our local economy. On the manufacturing front, we are seeing a significant increase in the amount of interest we're getting from manufacturing companies, especially companies that are operating in the rum distillery space, interestingly. One of those companies, Bahama Distillery Company, is now open for business and they're manufacturing a selection of premium rums with indigenous flavors. If you haven't tried their rums, you should try them. Very, very, very nice, I hear. Ian was telling me about a flavor the other day. We also recently concluded major upgrades and renovations to downtown Freeport that included upgrades to buildings, infrastructure, and landscaping. So if you haven't had a chance to visit downtown Freeport, you're going to see something significantly different from what you may have seen just 2 or 3 years ago. Exquisite Yachts is a company headquartered in Dubai that specializes in the manufacture and sale of luxury catamarans. Last year, they concluded the acquisition of a local resort and marina, which they are presently renovating and upgrading. Standinger Island is another real estate development project that's earmarked for Freeport. And this is a high-end luxury residential real estate development with an estimated project value of about $85 million. The project entails the development of 25 luxury properties, and that will range in price from $3.5 million to about $6 million. The complete build-out for this project is expected to take place over a 2-year period. Another major real estate development project planned for Freeport is the development of a 6 Senses luxury resort. This development project value is somewhere in the region of $250 million, and construction is expected to begin early next year. Ernst & Young, or EY, recently established an international presence here in Freeport. And they set up an international office to focus on wealth management. And they have been capitalizing on the BH-1B visa program, which you'll hear about later on. And they intend to expand their employee count later this year. And certainly the BH-1B visa program will serve them well as they look to attract additional talent from overseas. Another major hospitality project that will be taking place in Freeport in the very near future. We expect an announcement on this particular project within the next 2 or 3 months. And it's called the Blue Water Lucayan Resort and Marina development, where we'll see 75 luxury condos developed, 34 luxury townhomes being developed. The first phase of this project will be about $50 million. And this is earmarked for what we consider, or what we refer to as Port Lucaya. Freeport is also leading the charge in the Bahamas in green energy, with several alternative energy projects slated to come on stream over the next 12 months. The first project that will be coming on stream will be the Lucayan Solar Power Plant. Lucayan Solar Power Company will be the first utility-scale independent power provider in the Bahamas operating in the green energy space. The plant will also consist of a 30-acre solar farm generating about 11 megawatts of energy. The project represents a $15 million investment. The IDB is also a funding partner in this project, and it is commercialized through a PPA, or power purchase agreement, with the local power utility company. Construction will take somewhere in the region of 9 to 10 months. And this will be a transformational project for Grand Bahama and the Bahamas in general, being the first utility scale commercial green energy company providing energy on a commercial level. And there are several other projects in the green space that will be coming on stream in Freeport later this year. So look out for more announcements coming with respect to alternative energy projects in Freeport. Now, I'll end there, but there are a few number of other projects earmarked for Freeport that will be transformational as well, including the development of the international airport, redevelopment of the international airport rather, and the sale and redevelopment of the Grand Lucayan property. And with that, I will kick it over to my colleague, Donovan.
Thank you very much, Derek. Thank you very much, everyone who's on the panel. So we're going to talk about the creation of the Technology Innovation Hub of the Bahamas, and why Freeport is the ideal location for it. So when you think about the Bahamas, most people know the Bahamas as being a touristic center globally. So we built a brand there. We've also built a brand in financial services. But one of the things that that we want to do, and namely the Grand Bahama Port Authority, as well as the government, is essentially expand the national economy beyond tourism and financial services. And so when you think about where these opportunities lie, it actually lies in technology, the creation of a technology sector. When you build a technology sector in the Bahamas, you provide employment and wealth-building opportunities for Bahamians. When you think about where this technology innovation hub can be located, Freeport is actually the ideal location. And it's the ideal location for two primary reasons. Freeport has the infrastructure in place. This particular city was built to sustain and support 250,000 residents. And presently today, there's less than 40,000 residents in the city of Freeport. And then also there's the inherent tax advantages of being a free trade zone. And so Freeport becomes a very ideal location for this kind of technology innovation hub. Next slide. So what makes the Bahamas attractive? Obviously for us, it's the lowest tax jurisdiction. The country is open to economic diversification. And this is clearly demonstrated in the fact that the government of the Bahamas enacted the Commercial Enterprises Act legislation, which you heard of earlier. And this was specifically created to encourage international companies as well as Bahamians to form international partnerships and start these entities within the Bahamas. In addition to that, we recognize that when you build a technology-based company, you have to have the talent in place. Recognizing that we're just developing our own talent, the government also created the BH-1B visa program, and this allows companies to bring in that talent. The other thing that we've been blessed with as a country, is proximity to the United States of America. And so as indicated earlier, we're less than an hour's plane ride to most of the major islands, ideally Freeport, Grand Bahama, and Providence, from the major US cities. The other thing that really works in our favor is our dollar, the Bahamian dollar, is on par with the US dollar. And so when you consider calculating compensation, when you consider maintaining the standard of living for the workers that are here in the Bahamas, we have the ability, because we have our dollar on par with the US dollar, in order to maintain that level of compensation. The other thing that we have in the Bahamas is educated professionals. And so we don't have a lot of them, but we do have quite a number of educated professionals in a number of different areas, including technology, financial services, and law. The other thing that's important with the Bahamas is our IT infrastructure. And so we have gigabit fiber network that ties into Florida, ideally the map of America. And we have the ability to essentially provide the broadband and the data services that companies require. Again, Freeport is a zero taxes, and it will be there until the Hawksbill Creek agreement expires, or we hope extended. And so obviously we've heard about a number of advantages already in Freeport Grand Bahama. And one of the things that's extremely important here is the available of real estate and housing. So when you think about locating an office, when you think about bringing workers to the Bahamas, you have to have a place that it can span very, very quickly. The city of Freeport has some 70,000 acres of undeveloped land that's ready to be developed. So when you think about the ability to expand to meet the needs of a growing workforce, Freeport Grand Bahama is ideal. Again, as mentioned earlier, the city was built to support up to 250,000 residents, given its infrastructure and its layout. We have the ability to expand to meet those particular needs. The other thing that the organization has, when you think about technology companies, you have to have the ability to host meetings, to host technology conferences. Freeport Grand Bahama has the available hotel rooms and meeting spaces. And as you can hear from Derek, there are plans in the works in order to expand the availabilities of these facilities. Also, most importantly, is airlift. The fact that the government is now committing to building a brand new international airport that will provide airlifts to significant major cities, not just in Florida on the eastern seaboard, but also into Europe as well. So this makes Freeport Grand Bahama ideal location in order to support the kind of growth that we anticipate for the tech sector. So when you think about creating a technology innovation hub, our goal is to become the largest of this such type of tech hub in the Caribbean. And Freeport Grand Bahama has the ability to do that. But in order to be successful here, you have to have an ecosystem that works. And so you have to have the government working with the Grand Bahama Port Authority, working with the private sector, working with the international companies, and more importantly, having an educated population that essentially can meet the requirements of the jobs that are become available with building the tech sector. So as mentioned earlier, when you talk about what the government is doing, the government has laid the framework for the ability to be able to build this particular type of industry in the country. And so everything that's been done from a legislative perspective is in place. And so as an investor from the outside looking in to the Bahamas, you never have to worry about whether or not your particular business is supported or the government is pro-business with respect to attracting companies here. All of the legislation is in place to handle both the incorporation of your companies as well as bringing in your workers. Recognizing too that with nearshoring, you need to have access to major cities throughout the world. Obviously, the commitment is being made to build the international airport, as mentioned earlier. Next slide. And again, as Ian would have mentioned, the Grand Bahama Port Authority is really taking the lead in making sure that businesses or entrepreneurs or investors that decide to come to Freeport to set up shop have a one-stop shop entity to work with. And so we will make it as easy as possible for you to form your entity in order to move forward with building your particular business within Freeport Grand Bahama. Next slide. When you look at the role of the private sector, so you would have a lot of Bahamians that may ask questions of how do they get involved in this? And so the anticipation is we will grow the city of Freeport. Obviously, there are other components that will contribute, but the technology sector will serve to do a lot in expanding Freeport. To accommodate the people and the businesses that come to Freeport, there's opportunities to create housing, there's opportunities for restaurants, entertainment, and retail. And so when you think about the local economy thriving, there becomes a spin-off effect in terms of what you can create for other Bahamians to participate in. So even though we're building a technology sector, that's the focus. There's opportunities beyond technology for Bahamians to participate within this. And so it's one of those things that we have to recognize that it's the mindset of inclusiveness. And so as a Bahamian, you have to recognize that there are opportunities that will emerge based on building this tech sector. As an international person coming in, you have to recognize as well that there are certain areas that Bahamians have been set aside rather for Bahamians to invest in. And so this particular opportunity, in terms of how the government has visioned it, goes hand in hand in creating opportunities not just for international investors, but also for locals. Next slide. When you think about establishing the nearshore locations within the Bahamas, we believe, again, that we're ideal. When you look at our location to North America, when you look at our location to South and Central America, we become ideal. Most importantly, when you look at what Freeport Grand Bahama has to offer, we become the ideal location to build this technology hub. So for us, being able to offer Freeport, being able to offer the infrastructure, being able to say to the rest of the world that you can come here and essentially establish your global customer base from the Bahamas, we believe becomes a very, very unique opportunity for us. Now, when you talk about building the tech sector, local technical capacity is also important. So when we think about the institutions and the qualified Bahamians and the professional development, those are the kinds of things that essentially are important to make sure that the local population continues to move forward. Obviously, the government is making investments in the University of the Bahamas in order to essentially build out our technical education capacity, but it also requires partnerships with other organizations. We essentially will be hearing from Quest later on this afternoon. They're a very, very large multinational organization that provides training as well as onshoring and nearshoring support activities for its customers. And so when you talk about bringing these particular partners, along with government and the private sector, into this particular arena, you talk about an opportunity to educate Bahamians and bring our people along with the development of the tech sector as well. With the University of the Bahamas, there's also a strategic focus on building capacity there as well. Right now, the University of the Bahamas has a number of technical degree programs in computer information systems, electrical engineering technology, biology, with a focus on chemistry, mathematics. There are approximately 850,000 students enrolled in these technical degree programs now. On an average, about 90 graduates come out of these programs every year. Obviously, next slide. The government of the Bahamas is investing heavily in building capacity within the northern campus. And you can see the enrollment at UB right now is slightly more than 4,000 students with about 800 students involved in these tech sectors. 55% of the graduates are currently employed and another 8% go on to see advanced degrees. Next slide. In building capacity locally, what the government has committed to is making investments in the northern campus. So right now, the plans are for offering additional engineering degree programs and computer science programs at UB North. And also what's being contemplated is the establishment of a new School of Innovation Technology for the University of the Bahamas North Campus in Freeport, Grand Bahama. So when we think about what's taking place here strategically, when we think about what the government has done with respect to establishing the legislation and now making the investments in education, we also want to train the Bahamian workforce to be able to take advantage of these opportunities that building a tech sector provides to us. And so making sure that these students are educated, making sure that the right partnerships are formed so that skills can be developed and honed in order for them to participate fully within this new tech sector that we're looking for. Next slide. From a global perspective, and this is something that obviously was touched on earlier, what we also want to recognize is that Grand Bahama has the ability to also provide manufacturing opportunity, given the fact that it's a free trade zone. And so raw materials can be imported tax-free, and finished goods can be exported internationally tax-free. When you think about the taxes that are now being contemplated for global corporations with respect to the 15% minimum tax, given the fact that Freeport Grand Bahama is a free trade zone, there's the opportunity to be exempt from these types of taxes. So when you look at being competitive in the global marketplace, when you look at being able to maximize opportunity and return to shareholders, when you look to be able to essentially offer opportunities locally from an employment standpoint, Freeport, given its inherent advantages, can definitely be a location that's ideal for technology-based companies. Next slide. And so with that, I'd like to thank you. Obviously, I see there are questions coming in, so we'll be more than happy to entertain those questions at the end of the presentation, in particular, at the end of the panel discussion. So,
thank you, Dr. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Charmaine.
Thank you, Dr. Moxie. Thank you, Mr. Roll. Thank you, Mr. Newbold. Listen, this is why I sincerely get excited when I not only get to participate in presentations like this, but as a Grand Bahamian, I am actually living this experience. And so I had an opportunity to go through our list of our participants, and I see that there's some familiar faces, names that I am familiar. I know you guys. And so I'm gonna just plug a charge to us as Grand Bahamians. Some of this information you may not have relatively been aware of. Some of it you may have known. I'm going to hold us accountable to not only share this information, but also promote this information as a Grand Bahamian, because these are opportunities as we now segue into the second half of our webinar that you can ably take advantage of. And so I just want to say thank you to our presenters. Before we segue into our second half of our webinar, I'm going to come back to you with another Who Am I challenge. Okay, so again, this is your opportunity to participate until we get to the question and answer period. As we started, you're going to type your answer into the question and answer chat box. So here we go. And because we ended on a nearshoring tech opportunity that Dr. Moxie kind of mentioned, this is where we're going to go with our little question answer when you answer my question. So this is a tech company that has taken advantage of nearshoring opportunities and manufacturing operations in Costa Rica. The company has been able to take, as mentioned, advantage of that particular company's skilled workforce and favorable business environment. This company has also been very successful in expanding its production capabilities in that entire region. And so your little hint was it's a tech company. Who am I? Who am I? We're in the tech space. Anybody, any takers? D'Angelo said, Google, sorry, D'Angelo, good try, but that is not the correct answer. Anybody else? Did somebody say Lucayan Solar? Unfortunately, no, that is not correct. It's not that organization either. I'm going to give you another hint before we go into the introduction of our second half of our panelists. If you look down on your device, if you're using a Dell computer, there you go, Mr. Roll. Thank you. That is correct. The tech company is Intel. Now, I was about to give the little jingle, but I was not a good choir member. But if you hear, or if you can remember the Intel jingle, it's that little tune, dun, 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 dun. That should ring a bell. So thank you for your participation thus far. As we segue into our second half of our presentation, I'm going to have the esteemed honor again to introduce our panelists. Now, Dr. Moxie will be moderating this second half of our webinar, but I'm just going to use this opportunity to briefly just give a background of who our panelist is. And I will begin with Mr. Daniel Finch. Daniel has a rich and varied experience of 20+ years in the recruiting and staffing, human resources, outsourcing, and IT sectors. He has a deep understanding of contingent and permanent recruitment solutions and an exemplary track record of driving growth and recruitment, as well as staffing solutions globally. His experience and expertise have positively impacted the organization which he is associated with, Quest, in making it a global leader in recruitment and staffing vertically. Our second presenter is that of Mrs. Jillian Chase Jones. And Mrs. Jones is one of the senior attorneys of the firm of Delaney Partners, commercial lawyers. She joined the firm as a partner in 2017. She has extensive commercial law practice experience and have been very, very instrumental in recent assignments, which included high-value real estate transactions, substantial involvement in projects relating to major commercial projects within our country of the Bahamas. And finally, I introduce to you Ms. Raylene Gagnon. And Raylene is a general manager of Total Talent Intelligence at Magnet Global. Raylene is responsible for overseeing a global team of dedicated analysts in the development of SaaS, SaaS, and DaaS, DaaS solutions, leveraging the industry's largest collection of workforce, compensation, hiring, and employment data. From Magnet Pay Intel, hint, hint, which feeds real-time compensation insight to hiring managers and business leaders, to enabling data-driven decisioning, to Magnet Talent Intel, which monitors the availability, skill, demographics, and compensation of talent internationally, and strategic advisory services. Raylene's team is responsible for delivering market, compensation, and workforce intelligence to the market. Ladies and gentlemen, I present our three panelists who will be sharing meaningful information, which will be obviously led by Dr. Moxie. Dr. Moxie.
Thank you very much, Charmaine. Appreciate it. So what we will do this afternoon from a panel perspective is we will have first up Mrs. Jillian Jones Chase to give an overview of her experiences in actually working with the Commercial Enterprises Act, as well as the BH-1B visa legislation that was put in place. And she will give her experience that working with international firms who are actually taking advantage of nearshoring in Grand Bahama. Secondly, we will have Mr. Daniel Frinker actually give a presentation and talk about his company Quest, but in more detail, really speak about the concept of nearshoring and the trends in the marketplace in terms of what's happening, if you will, as well, and why companies are looking at nearshoring as a possible solution to their talent needs. And then thirdly, obviously, Raylene, who knows Daniel very well, will join him in speaking more about a lot of the data and the trends and what she sees happening within the industry as well. And so if you have any questions about nearshoring, what this means, really getting it defined, if you have any questions about essentially how your companies can be relocated to the Bahamas almost seamlessly, these panelists are here to answer those particular questions. So now we get to the nuts and bolts of making this happen. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Mrs. Jillian Chase Jones so she can introduce herself or introduce what she does to help companies take advantage of nearshoring in the Bahamas. Thank you.
And thank you, Dr. Moxie. Good afternoon, everyone. So as was mentioned, I am a partner at the firm of Delaney Partners. We're based here in Nassau. And I had the wonderful privilege just last year of actually assisting an international company with their nearshoring project, where they relocated or established a nearshoring office in Freeport, Grand Bahama, to provide services to the United States. And it was a very smooth process, one in which the government of the Bahamas, the Grand Bahama Port Authority were all actively involved in making sure that it was as seamless as possible. So what do you need to do, and what am I here to assist you with? Everything from incorporation of your legal entity that's going to be providing the service from the Bahamas, to submitting your application to the relevant authorities for your commercial enterprise certificate, to assisting you with the ropes of going through the Grand Bahama Port Authority, which, like I say, is a one-stop shop, as they've mentioned before, and are highly motivated and very receptive with helping you process your applications in a most timely fashion. The Commercial Enterprises Act came into force into the Bahamas in 2018, and it was the government's push to encourage business in the Bahamas, to attract new types of businesses to the Bahamas. And it's a very simple process in terms of your application. You are introducing yourself to the Bahamas through your business plan. Who are you? What it is that you're looking to do, and how are you going to impact the Bahamas, be it through staffing of Bahamians, training of Bahamians, and just the services being offered. Once you've been granted your specified commercial enterprise certificate, it permits you to pretty much hit the ground running. You are able to immediately come into the Bahamas to start setting up your business. And once you're here, within 30 days, you would make your applications to the Department of Immigration for your, BH-1B visa. That application process has also been streamlined, that once it's in, there's a 14-day turnaround. And if you happen to not receive a response from the Department of Immigration within those 14 days, it is deemed to be approved. And that work visa that you get is for 3 years and can be renewed up to a further period of 3 years, so 6 years in total. And that process also allows you to make applications for your spouse and any dependent children. And if you happen to be operating in a space that requires some other regulation, be it if it's wealth management or securities trading or something like that, then you would also have to make applications to the relevant regulator in that respect.
Okay. Anything else left to add, Attorney Chase Jones?
I think that is a quick blast,
Yes.
but I'm always here to answer any.
Yes, and we're anticipating the questions that are coming as well. That's excellent.
Sure.
So thank you very much. So with
You're
that,
welcome.
I'm going to introduce Daniel Frinker. And Daniel can provide an overview of Nearshoring and certainly his company. And also Raylene can contribute that as well. And looking forward to the Q&A period also. Daniel?
Yes, thank you. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay.
Yes, you're great.
I'm good.
Coming through. Yes, definitely.
Perfect. I'll just briefly talk a little bit about who Quest is. So Quest is actually a company that was just established about 15 years ago. And we have gone from a company that was largely based in India to now spread across 9 countries, employing over 500 million people. We are a global service provider offering a range of solutions from staffing to upskilling to reskilling to technology solutions. But what we're really here to talk about today is what is the global situation and some of the complicating factors that are impacting talent, because any business that's looking to start being in the Port Authority of the Bahamas to the United States to anywhere in the world is really dealing with some really dynamic, both macro and microeconomic factors. And so we're actually going to be talking a little bit about that today. And so actually, I know Raylene Gagnon has done an exceptional job at being able to pull together some very specific demographic information about the Bahamas. So with that, Raylene, I'll actually turn the mic over to you to really kind of talk about what are some of the things that you've uncovered with regards to the Bahamas.
Thanks, Dan. And thank you, everyone. I mean, this has been such an excellent overview of all of the advantages to businesses looking for the right location to near shore. I mean, everything from the tax advantages and the incentives to the investments into the education and the logistics at the airport. But the one area that Dan and I really wanted to focus on was the talent itself, right? You know, we know from an industry standpoint that certain sectors have had a spotlight in the Bahamas historically. But when we look at the population overall and at the density, particularly in Freeport and a couple of other communities within the Bahamas, we see an opportunity specific to the workforce population that is yet to be untapped. When we look at the age disbursement, both from a male and female standpoint, not only do you have quite a bit of opportunity from a gender equality standpoint, but based on some of the aging life cycles within the local communities, you have a huge pocket with the largest portion of your population being of prime working age and a substantial number of emerging workers continuing to strengthen that over time.
Oh, Raylene, do we lose you?
Hello?
Raylene, are you back?
I think I am. Can you hear me?
Okay, we can hear you now.
All right, I shut off video. It might have been the problem.
Okay.
I was just saying the sustainability of the aging workforce coming into the workforce adds to the benefits. So not only have we seen what the Bahamas is doing to invest in the local community for advantages for the business, but when we dive into that talent, you have the highest in the region from an availability of upskillable emerging workers. And you'll continue to have that over the course of the next 10, 15, 20 years in that local market based on the aging demographics. You also have a high level of English proficiency, and we just saw quite a bit around energy and solar, focusing on the increased reliability and efficiencies from an electricity and an internet connectivity perspective. Makes it a huge viable market that has advantages over some of the surrounding communities in the Latin American marketplace. We also have accessibility. We've got major airlines flying into the established airport systems, investments into the regional airports, and huge opportunity of growth so that you'll have options.
Raylene, I think we might have lost your audio one more time.
Out now. I knew I should have dialed in on my phone.
Yep, we hear you.
Okay. And the other opportunity was around engagement. So the engagement of the individuals who you might want to rotate into the Bahamas for a month, 3 months, or even a year. You've got alignment from a time zone standpoint. And as we've already covered previously, in addition to competitive wages, you've got a lot of competitive statutory cost. You've got low payrolling tax. You've got huge tax benefits. You've got your lower VAT tax. And so there's an opportunity to tap into the youth employment and also invest in training within the existing workforce and take advantage of some of the inbound migration, as well as other communities in the region are looking to move into that local area. So the opportunity is beyond just the advantages to the business, but to the workforce itself in the local area and to the sustainability that you would get from that.
Very good. So maybe I wanted to walk everyone through a little bit about what we're currently seeing in the global environment. One of the number one questions that I get asked almost on a day in, day out basis is, what do we see as the future as it relates to employment of a variety of skills? And I wish I can tell you that it's an easy thing to be able to prophesize. But here's what we do know to be true. According to a variety of data sources, including the ones that I'm posting here from Career Builder, we know that inflation really is coming down. Now, is it going to be something that we see as a hard landing, soft landing? What are the implications with the Fed? Still remains to be determined, but at least we now have data sources to be able to show that indeed some of the financial easing that we've seen around the world is starting to take effect. Interestingly enough, this is probably one of the most anticipated recessions we've ever had that has yet to actually materialize. When we actually saw the data come up for the month of January, we were anticipating to actually see a lower demand curve in North America as it relates to new job vacancies. It was around 10 million positions posted in the month of January. To give you an idea, pre-COVID, that number was actually closer to about 7. So number one, we're actually seeing an increase in job vacancy demand. Number two, we actually saw the US unemployment rate decline. But I wish I can tell you that it was just that easy in terms of looking at things like inflation, job demand. Um, you, s- I would challenge this team and any economist joining the call if we've seen the number of other implications that are impacting not just the US economy, but the global economies, from the Russian-Ukrainian war, environmental impact, lingering implications as it relates to COVID. Um, we already talked about inflation, interest rates, but while all of this is going on, and just to highlight some of the data that really just talked about with regards to the Bahamas, is you're actually having a shrinking labor force. Skills scarcity, especially within IT and business professional type of roles, continues to accelerate. If you're looking at just general IT positions, there's roughly 2 to 3 openings per available person. But when you actually get into some specific skills, be it cybersecurity, full stack developer, those numbers can actually jump up exponentially, 5 to 8 open roles per available worker. So all this is going on in the ecosystem in 2023, and any one of these individual things or combined things can really dramatically shift the demand curve. But the one thing that I would say is for sure is we don't anticipate the labor force to be expanding exponentially anytime soon.
And Dan, I
So,
think that's what makes
oh,
a very compelling opportunity for folks on the phone today, because that view I showed earlier of the age disbursement in the workforce, that's not the same as what we're seeing in many other markets. In the US, we have a substantial number of our workforce leaving the workforce environment, right? They're retiring early or they're retiring on time. We've got more and more workers going into entrepreneurship or becoming gig workers, and they're removing themselves from the traditional workforce, no longer accessible to employers. And everything you just spoke about from a talent scarcity standpoint, it's compounded the hiring process, because domestically in the United States, we were just looking at this earlier today, and quarter over quarter in the first quarter of this year, if we look back, not just through the past few years of COVID, but even prior to, we are at a 30 to a 45% increase in the amount of time it's taking us to fill positions, whether we're looking at full-time resources or not. And you mentioned, we've had inflation and that recession that we keep waiting to hit the numbers. And the reality is that we are seeing increased demand for certain pockets of labor. And that's one of the opportunities I see here in the Bahamian market as well, because the workforce is still being invested in and it's being cultivated and grown, and there's not that aggressive demand. There's an opportunity to gain a competitive advantage in this particular market by looking at these areas. And I sort of like this view here, if you don't mind my hijacking this slide, because the industry supporting the staffing market in the United States has grown exponentially throughout the course of COVID, because many employers simply could not get those full-time employees into their organization, and they were only able to pull in temporary labor or commit to a temporary workforce over a certain period of time. So the staffing industry has grown and supported that increased demand, but at the same time, we're not able to fabricate people, right? So even though we have many people looking to hire and fill these additional positions in a contingent or a temporary workforce way, it's not as though we can create additional workers to fill that need. What we are enabling is the movement of workers between organizations as needs shift. And so when there's an opportunity to tap into a market where upskilling will create an influx of new talent that can be leveraged, where university investment is driving new emerging workers that aren't being tapped into, and where migration is staying steady so that a lot of this talent and brain trust is staying within the local market, this is where I see that opportunity to leverage and to reduce some of the crunch we've seen domestically. And I think you have something too on the next slide that sort of supports that overall growth. Unless there was something in particular here.
So one of the things I wanted to highlight is, again, this is a forecast from Staffing Industry Analyst, and they are looking at a 2% increase if, however, you were to take into account nurses. So one of the things that really drove the increase were nurses, traveling nurses, if you actually take that out of the data, what you would actually see from the previous slide isn't a 2% increase, but a 5% increase. And again, what are we seeing the biggest demand? Information technology, business professional, engineering. So again, this is forecasted for 2023. All these are, as Relina talked to, is in the ecosystem of things that we're hearing and seeing today. At this point, I would say almost daily you're hearing about layoffs with certain companies like Meta, Alphabet, parent company of Google. But what's really going on is quite interesting is as you're seeing these layoffs happen within the tech sector, by all accounts, the talent is actually being redeployed into other areas within the economy. It'll be interesting to see how that continues to play out throughout the year, but it's really just a recalibration, because as we've seen during the age of COVID, most of these major tech companies actually accelerated their hiring, which makes sense. You know, they were the companies that were providing the necessary infrastructure to do things like work from home, telemedicine, that sort of thing. Meanwhile, you take like the hospitality industry, the airline industry, which had to throttle back. Now we're actually seeing this big recalibration in terms of the supply demand curves. I did want to talk. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to add one more thing real fast. It's not an either or. You know,
Right.
I mean, those companies have been in those headlines for recent layoffs. We were doing some analysis recently of hiring trends, and in many cases, although some of these companies, and many of them were in the Q&A earlier when we were doing our Nearshoring quiz, those same companies that are announcing layoffs in one part of their business are actually snapping up some of the talent that's being laid off by some of their peers. So they're still hiring. They're just reorganizing. And they've also done a lot of nearshoring investments, not just the examples we heard earlier, but since 2020, there's been a tripling of efforts of U.S. companies that were looking for the specific reasons we're walking through now to find just pockets of talent that they could nearshore and have augment their existing resources onshore.
So when you use terms like IT spending and IT is looking to grow, let's take a little bit of a deeper dive in terms of what that is. If you were to map out even those corporations, again, being like Cisco, Meta, in terms of where they're actually targeting selective cuts, a lot of that is in their B2C business environment. But if you actually look at the B2B business environment, so you're actually seeing an increase in those particular demands. And so again, things like communication services, devices, again, business to consumer, you're actually seeing a retraction. This is for 2022. But all those things that actually support major corporations continues to see either single digit, in some cases double digit. Now, what does this look like forecasted for 2023? Again, we still see some softness as it relates to the B2C marketplace. But again, you're seeing a lot of that desire to grow within the B2B space. So what kind of roles within the B2B space? So for those that are familiar with Gartner, they talk about the magic quadrants and whatnot. And this really kind of speaks to a little bit more graphically of the types of roles that corporations are not only going to need today in 2023, but forecasted well into 2024, 2025. In fact, Relina, I'll probably put a softball in front of you. I know you've seen a lot of the data in terms of demand for a variety of type of skills, especially within infrastructure and ERP systems. But you touched on this earlier. We heard Derek and Ian even reference this earlier. But one of the things that the Bahamian market has that I think is excellent is actually the soft skills. You know, we continually to hear that the reason why one candidate doesn't get the job of another is because the lack of soft skills, which includes things like proficiency. So Raylene, do you maybe want to comment about some of those competitive advantages that the Bahamas has in this area?
Yeah, I think those soft skills are important, right? It's in part driven by the strength of the hospitality sector that has previously given a lot of experience to a lot of the workforce that's in play today. And it's the communication skills, it's the interpersonal skills, the ability to negotiate, to compromise. Those are critically missing in some of the key workforces that others have explored elsewhere in the region or even offshore. And, you know, in a side-by-side comparison, success for someone who's actually going to advance their career and become in an organization, those are the key skills that we rely upon. Because a lot of the roles, and you see many of them highlighted here specifically that we've seen nearshoring, have been in applications development, in the ERP and the CRM software, and in the back end and front end and full stack development. And those are roles that require collaboration. They are not independent technology roles of the past. It requires teamwork and collaboration. That's where those skills become incredibly advantageous.
Excellent. I feel like we've touched on this a little bit, Raylene, with regards to when you're doing a good comparative analysis in terms of where do you want to ultimately invest and find talent? Yes, you can look at the size of your talent pools. You can look at wage arbitrage in terms of what a USD worker, where a worker being paid in USD is vis-a-vis Indian rupees or European euros. But a lot of people don't fully take into account some of the things that we have mentioned previously, even in this call, which is things like turnover and even benefits, taxes, that sort of thing. Do you want to maybe quickly comment about the competitive nature that the Bahamas would have as it relates to being able to kind of look at this labor cost analysis at a 10,000-foot macro level?
Absolutely. I mean, at this level, this is sort of the higher perspective of why nearshoring in Latin America overall has become such a key strategy in the past few years. You know, there's no arguing that there are certain markets in Asia or certain markets in Eastern Europe who may be cheaper than Freeport from a labor cost standpoint. But it's not just about labor costs today. It is about reliability and sustainability and consistency. Risk and fluctuation are things that we have had an awful lot of in the last few years. And when you compare these three major components that drive labor cost and arbitrage, turnover is the one that you can't control or predict. And turnover creates such a disruption and a risk to business continuity over time that in other communities where you have a much higher turnover, and the Bahamas is much lower in region than many other markets like we've heard mentioned, Costa Rica or Mexico, because the workforce and the wages are more stable economically. So when you have a lower threshold for benefits and turnover is significantly lower than other markets, it's a great value proposition to an employer because you do have more confidence in business continuity. You have more stability in your labor cost projections because you're not constantly backfilling positions. And you have more consistent business performance and growth because you don't have a portion of your workforce constantly in training and in L&D. So it allows you to get in quicker, establish that productivity and the metrics you're looking for, and maintain a lower and more consistent cost over time. And I think that's something that we need to stress as we evaluate the Bahamas and Freeport in particular in comparison to other markets in the region.
Excellent. Thank you. I feel like we've probably really talked about this heavily in terms of the demand for IT skills, but I think it's also really important to kind of highlight when you think IT has now become ubiquitous in the standard operations of any major organization, which is kind of one reason why if you compare the layoff percentages, the number of roles from, let's say, even 2000, 2009 to even this last year, if you were to go back to 2000, I think largely you would say that the IT space within a typical organization was a cost center. So if you were looking to reduce costs, you let go some of your IT folks because it wasn't mission critical. I would challenge you today, you can't necessarily let go of your IT staff without actually having your business come to a grinding halt. So one reason why we're seeing a even further reduction in layoffs, specifically in the IT sector, is because it's moved from being a mission critical, or excuse me, from a cost center to actually a mission critical area within any type of organization. One of the other things though, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to add one thing and tie two different comments together that we've made already. And that was the reason why we see tech layoffs happening in the tech industry specifically at most, and then seeing that talent snapped up so quickly is because of what you just said. It's because there is an intrinsic growth and investment in the IT skills across all sectors. So while the tech industry, and in particular some of those larger tech innovators, were doubling down on that talent during the COVID period, they now have to restructure and reorganize and get rid of some excess investment that they made, whereas other companies have been struggling to get that talent all along, and that's why it's happening so quickly, making it important that you're competitive. For instance, that you have the opportunity, if you, IT talent, come work for us, you get a 1-year rotation in the Bahamas. Those types of things are creative incentives that can drive attraction and retention today.
So one of the things that I wanted to talk about, and we've been tracking for several years, is talent migration, and specifically within the white collar IT business professional space. If you look at it from a US perspective, you actually saw a lot of talent migration really leave major talent hubs, places like the Silicon Valley, Northern California area, New York. You saw people essentially, we were literally watching and tracking people leave those particular cities and relocate to places like Boise, Idaho, Austin, Texas, Salt Lake City, for other locations. That was something we saw during the age of COVID. One of the other things that I would say is a relatively new development, especially as we looked in the second half of 2022 and the current quarter of 2023, is a number of the tech layoffs that you're seeing are actually occurring with H-1B visa holders. 75% of H-1B visa holders in the United States are people of Indian nation of origin. So what you're also seeing is now we're I think the current count is about 150 highly skilled, highly educated Indian nationals with advanced degrees in IT engineering, certainly business professional skills, being forced to essentially relocate back to their nation of origin, because in the United States, if you are laid off, you only have about 60 days to be able to land and find a new position before you're ultimately asked to leave. So, number one, we saw major talent migrations inside the United States, but you're also now starting to see that labor supply actually decrease. And by the way, this is only through essentially January of 2023. We still don't have the data yet for February on. So we could be potentially looking at hundreds of thousands of highly skilled workers leaving the talent pool in the United States. When the supply goes down, the demand curve remains constant. What does that mean for your equilibrium price, both in the short term and even long term? It's going to cost corporations more and more to be able to find the necessary talent to be able to execute their major business initiatives. As a matter of fact, at the most recent World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, it was almost 80% of the CEOs being interviewed that attended that particular event went on record to say that their business model becomes unviable in a 10-year horizon because they don't think they have enough talent to be able to execute on their major business initiatives. So this skills gap does not look to abate anytime soon. It is further being complicated by several economic factors, wars around the world. But the one constant is, again, talent scarcity. So Donovan, I guess when we had planned this, I'd kind of foresee that maybe this is a good time for us to maybe kind of open it up to some roundtable conversations and Q&A sessions. So
Definitely,
with this,
definitely so. Definitely
I will
so.
turn the mic over to you.
No, definitely. I appreciate that. Thank you very much, Daniel. Thank you very much, Raylene. And thank you very much, Jillian. So for me, I want to start off by asking some questions myself. And then obviously there's some questions that have come in to the chat, the Q&A box as well. So attendees, if you have any additional questions, feel free to add to the Q&A box. And I guess my first question, I'm going to go back to Jillian as well. And it has to do with ease of doing business. And so basically what you've described when you talked about incorporating the company through the Commercial Enterprises Act, getting the visas through the BH-1B visa program, when you look at timelines and difficulty and cost, how do you compare and contrast that with what people would normally go through with respect to establishing their businesses here in the Bahamas?
Okay, thank you for that question. In terms of timeline for the establishment of a commercial enterprise under the act, as opposed to the regular process, you are cutting down your time, I would say, by at least 2 months. As a non-Bahamian coming into the Bahamas to do business regularly, your first port of call would be our Bahamas Investment Authority, where you have to provide your business plan, your synopsis of everything, similar to what you would do for this process. But the processing time of that application is a lot longer. And once you get that, then you still have all your other applications to make. You would have your immigration applications to make, which are not granted this accelerated timeline of the 14-day turnaround. Immigration applications right now are taking anywhere between 6 to 8 weeks. So there is a substantial delay there in being able to hit the ground running. In terms of cost, the visas that are granted, the BH-1B visa, the cost for your primary applicant for an approved visa is $2,000, whereas going through the regular immigration route, it's on a scale depending on what your position is, where your chief executive officer would be paying an annual work permit fee of $15,500.
Right. Wow, that's a significant difference for that
Yeah.
as well. And when you talk about ease of doing business now within the Freeport, Grand Bahama Port Authority realm, where they grant licenses and permits and things of that nature, how is their structure different from going national in terms of the ease of doing business and very quickly getting through the processes?
Sure. So the advantage that you have with the Grand Bahama Port Authority is it is a one-stop shop. If you are looking to establish your business to operate anywhere else in the Bahamas, you have business license, that's one department. You have the regulators that you have to go to approve your building where you're going to be operating from. So that's town planning, environmental health. I mean, there are a number of different agencies that you have to go to who are not talking to one another.
Right.
So without having somebody to navigate you through that, it can take a very long time. I mean, because just for your business license alone, you're registering for VAT, you're registering for your TIN, you're registering for your business license, and all three of those, although they fall under the same department, those are three different areas where the flow of communication is not happening. In the experience that I had dealing with the Grand Bahama Port Authority and having an international business go and be nearshored, it was one point of contact, all the information flowed to that person, and it was easy to follow up. They were accessible. If there was anything, additional information that was needed, it was very quickly communicated.
Okay, excellent. That's great. Thank you very much for that. My next question, I'm going to transition to Daniel and Raylene. When you think about what's happening in the U.S. in terms of, everybody understands that the the H-1B visa in the U.S. has a cap. So you face this issue where you have the cap of 85,000. That gets exhausted pretty quickly. You have companies that are going through layoffs or restructuring, but obviously they still need to meet the needs of their current clients, their talent pools. And so now, I mean, when you think about how you're going to retain this talent, what are some of the strategies that people are thinking of? And then obviously you heard about the advantages of Freeport. In your opinions, you do this for a living. How attractive do you think Freeport Grand Bahama and the Bahamas can be to these companies that need to redeploy talent? They can't necessarily get them their visas to work in the United States. So nearshoring now becomes an option. What are your thoughts on Freeport and how attractive this would be to some of your clients?
Well, so Dan, thank you. I think that's a great question. And I've sort of commented a couple of times about how rich some of the information that's been shared today has been. But I think one of the challenges that Freeport and the Bahamas in general have is there's not enough visibility into that information for organizations to consider themselves. So if they don't happen to catch this webinar, they don't know about the tactical and the strategic investments into education, about the huge projects that are being undertaken from an infrastructural standpoint. You know, myself and my career and in my current and previous role, there hasn't been a week that's gone by since the beginning of the pandemic where an onshore company wasn't looking at evaluating nearshore, and it is to some degree tied to this H-1B visa problem and limitation in the U.S. They lose some of these Indian resources, but they don't want to deal with the time zone difference from a programmatic disruption standpoint. So they look nearshore instead. But in all of the analysis that I've done, and again, there's been countless projects at this point, when I have to build a side-by-side comparison, I need to see the labor force broken down by skills. I need to see the number of students emerging from each university. I need to see the cost of living. And I saw some quotes from Marcelo in the chat, questions about the overall impact to the family, because when you relocate someone or when you tap into someone, there's other costs that go into that. And so I think that, the accessibility of your visas is fantastic. The fact that the Bahamas does not restrict foreign workers the way other Latin American countries like Panama or such do, and you can have foreign workers working with national workers is a great advantage. But if companies, when they're looking at the Latin American market, can't see how you compare side by side, they're not even considering you in most cases today. And so I see that as being a huge opportunity for you to not just share this information that we've covered today, but to make sure that the Ministry of Labor, the Ministry of Transportation, and the departments of the government are proactively putting information out there so that the World Data Bank has side-by-side information for you, so the trading economics stuff, et cetera.
Definitely, and that's something that Grand Bahama Port Authority is definitely focused on doing. In addition to the government of the Bahamas, I guess one of the things that I want to do too is really expand and think about the questions being asked. When you think about workforce development, when you think about artificial intelligence, workforce automation, and the fact that a lot of companies are focused on replacing workers with machines or machine learning, do you see that impacting the need for real labor? If you will, as well, or that's just a part of the normal technology cycles of developing new things that are more efficient, but labor will still be there. How impactful do you think those new AI systems, where they're looking to replace humans, will be in terms of impacting negatively the need for labor?
Yeah, I mean, with the exception of grocery stores where you do self-checkout now, there's very rarely a case in the workforce where you're truly replacing workers. You're more augmenting the workforce. Now, you can create more efficiency on the production line side in an industrial environment with robotics to do repetitive tasks, but AI, machine learning, it creates increased demand for those technology skills to constantly feed, drive, innovate, and improve upon that AI and machine learning. We are never going to hit a point where AI is everything it can be. Machine learning has learned everything it can know. It's always going to need more. And so I think it's increasing the focus on technology, and it's refining the requirements in industrial. Do we need fewer workers on a production line today than Ford did when he created the first one? Sure, because robots can do a lot of the nuts and bolts. But we need technicians and automation analysts to evaluate the machines and to make sure the quality testing is effective and accurate, et cetera. So, I mean, Dan, you've worked with a number of industrial companies and tech companies, and you've seen both sides of it, but I don't think you disagree with that.
No, I completely agree with it because I always love to give a historical context. I entered the workforce kind of at the tail end of the 90s .com boom, and people had the same type of fears and concerns about the incorporation of technology is going to replace all these workers. And although you can argue to a certain extent, yeah, there used to be a large secretarial pool within a lot of corporations. Well, guess what? Now people have PCs and laptops. That doesn't negate the fact that there's still a high demand curve for skills. It's just instead of doing one particular job, they're doing another. Right. I would also say if you look at one of the fastest growing trends right now you're seeing in IT is no code, low code development. And one of the reasons why you're seeing AI and automation, the rise of no code, low code, is because you can't find enough workers to actually develop the next gen tools needed for companies to be successful. So in my humble opinion, when you're looking at kind of these fears of AI replacing workers, you're just seeing them shift in terms of the kind of work that they're doing.
Understood. I want to go back and maybe Daniel can take the first stab at the question. When you look at implementing a nearshoring strategy, obviously Quest could be an IT staffing company,
Mhm.
and you have companies that may want to go it alone. What do you see as companies doing in order to really execute that strategy on nearshoring? Do you see companies employing companies such as Quest, which actually hold the workforce for them and they do the jobs, or would companies go it alone, as Jillian has done with her client, where they essentially establish their offices? So what do you see the trends and happening?
What's funny is, again, I'll give a quick historical context. HR with the side of a company used to be just payroll, running payroll. Now you actually see some pretty sophisticated talent acquisition teams that are subsets inside of major corporations, right? So when the conversations I'm having with companies, and I'll use one example of an organization that does a lot of work with auto manufacturing, specifically hybrid electric vehicles. So when you think about things like Tesla, this is public information, Tesla has been able to truncate the development of cars from a 3-year cycle. So you think of GM, Ford, Toyota, whatever, from CAD design to actually being in the showroom. They said, well, that's cool, but we would now need to do it within 18 months. And everyone thought they were crazy until they did it. Now they want to continue to further truncate that. Well, in order for that to happen, it's not just the organization Tesla, but think of all the parts companies things that go inside of a Tesla. And also think about kind of the evolution of what you see vehicles. And I'm using this as a great example because cars are still a great economic indicator in terms of how things are going. You're talking about incorporating solar panels on top of cars. So now think of the weight distribution and how you have to develop those harnesses. In order to be able to meet those cycle times with the type of new technologies, you now have to it's now becoming table stakes that you not only need the skills, but more and more you're seeing companies shift to a 24/7 operations, right? So essentially you might start in the United States, it might go offshore, it might come back onshore.
Right.
So
Right.
not, it's all these inputs that companies are struggling to kind of figure out: supply curve, demand curve. Raylene talked about a huge one, and we all take it for granted now. But remember, we still haven't been able to get the supply chain fully figured out. We still
Yeah.
have supply chain issues, not just in
Issues,
terms
right.
of hard manufacturing goods, but even services as well. So
Yeah, that's like the perfect example, because the one thing I would add to that, to go back to your initial question, Donovan, is just
Okay.
that for most organizations, the decision whether or not they use a staffing agency or they go directly or they reach out to Jillian on their own, it really is, are they moving an entire department to the Bahamas or to the Latin American market? Are they looking to move a percentage of their total workforce and have a full small entity or regional headquarters? Those are very different decisions that involve a much different level of recruitment. In a lot of cases, at least the work that I've done in the past few years has been around it's so difficult to find certain skills, or this department has become less efficient here. And so let's shift those in these small chunks to the region. Some less than previous to the pandemic. Some are still looking for a brick and mortar investment, but more now because of remote sourcing and
Right.
being able to have people work at least partially from home. It's less the real estate investment in a lot of cases today, and more about where can we tap into that talent and gain some advantages. So sometimes staffing, yes, sometimes straight to legal, sometimes straight to a real estate consultant, but it depends on how much they're moving and to what degree. And I think that's an important factor.
Understood. So let me just piggyback on top of that too. So when you talk about now companies relocating to a particular nearshore location, either bringing talent in or looking to develop talent, what's the mindset typical of these organizations? Is it that I just want to bring in all my talent, or do I also want to understand and assess what's there locally to try to develop that talent? Because maybe there's some cost advantages to doing that. There's some other advantages, obviously, inherent from a cultural standpoint in doing that as well. So what do you see in the thinking? Is it a mixture? Is it, no, I just want my people to be there, or do I want to understand what's available locally so that talent can be developed? And then what role does this Quest play in that development of talent?
Sure. You definitely see a mixture. Yes, you might bring in some of the captains, lieutenants, and maybe even, first sergeants. But But at the end of the day, you're going to want to have a real mixture of talent. And again, there's several reasons for that. Quest not only has the ability to really help to identify what does the demand curves look like for certain types of skills, but also has the ability to be able to create the type of curriculum and then either instructor-led or combination of instructor, virtual-led training courses to be able to actually take a certain either population or segment of the population and take them from a help desk person to a networking person with a CCNA, CCDA. I mean, we could go into a lot of details there, but ultimately we have that type of capability. In fact, one of the things that I would say is a competitive advantage of Quest, because one thing that you're seeing that is a difference between the Asian and Latin American markets versus even the North American market is, today in the United States, people still learn a lot through things like laptops and computers. Whereas what we see a lot in Latin America is being able to upskill people using mobile devices, mobile technologies. And that's now becoming, again, more ubiquitous. And I've seen this with large Japanese and Korean companies that are, they're constantly coming out with new products and services. They want to be able to train their sales, their marketing, their support staff on the latest, greatest products and services. And so more and more, this is a great example case study with Quest, is we have a segment of workers working for these companies. They come out with new products and services. Now they're being required to actually take some training courses on the new features and benefits of these services. And so it becomes this fortuitous loop because that is what companies look for. They want workers that understand their products, understand their services, that have a passion to learn, and they're willing to compensate for that. And we also see significant reductions, almost 2 standard deviations in turnover, because when people are being upskilled, not only are they learning new skills, but it increases their compensation. People feel fulfilled. And again, we talked previously in this presentation about the importance of turnover and the negative impacts it can have on a corporation. It has the opposite effect when you're looking at training and upskilling.
Understood. Got one more question, then I'm going to go to Jillian. I have a question for her. The other question here involves when you look at a company that's making the decision to decide where to nearshore, there's obviously certain criteria that they want to have present, some basic baseline criteria. When you think about what you've heard and what you've learned so far about Freeport, Grand Bahama, the Bahamas, do you believe that we have those fundamental ingredients to really have somebody take a serious look at this location for nearshoring?
I'll offer my opinion, and then Raylene, I'll toss it over to you.
Yeah.
Straight away, one of the first things that companies look for is, again, the openness and the partnership at a public-private level. Where I've seen companies and municipalities kind of go in divergent directions is because they're not on the same page. They feel taken for granted. To me, the thing that struck me straight away with the Bahamas is I think you have a real opportunity in terms of your workforce. The soft skills are amazing. Again, I think that's something that you really shouldn't take for granted. You clearly are invested in being able to import talent via your BH-1B program. And I would agree with Raylene's assessment, which is I think right now you're your own best kept secret. And doing more of these types of events to get the word out, I think is going to be huge, because if you can start hitting the radar screens of most major companies and be able to do a nice comparison in terms of what you all have to offer vis-a-vis some alternatives, I think what you're going to find very quickly is companies accelerating their investment into the Bahamian marketplace because you have all these attributes. Raylene, I'll throw it over to you.
Yeah, look, every company has different criteria. We've done projects where there's 10 requirements, and we've done projects where there was 200 and they were weighted. The big ones, though, come down to availability of talent, cost of talent, and accessibility of the talent. And you've got a lot of those boxes checked, but there's some you've got to work on, just positioning or advertising better. The talent's available. A lot of the challenges with nearshoring in other markets is the lack of English proficiency. So you guys do have an advantage there compared to a lot of the South and Central American markets. From an availability standpoint, again, the youth opportunity from the emerging workforce, there's a lot of learnability options in addition to the soft skills, but training needs to be done, and it doesn't need to be done by you. It can be an investment of the company coming in. Accessibility, you're doing the work you need to do on increasing the airport traffic and whatnot, but the consistency and access across the Bahamas themselves and in region is key. Being able to track not just the cost of the tax advantages, but to use that and make sure you push those opportunities in order to balance out the fact that the wages are that much lower and certainly are higher than a lot of the other Latin American markets. And you do have higher cost of living than a lot of those markets. So it's the business advantages you want to make sure you promote aggressively there. And then there was a question in the chat that I saw earlier that was around, other factors they might consider like environmental and economic. And you have more economic stability, you have less geopolitical risks than a lot of the other markets in the region that I've looked at. But storm systems and impact on utility grids and the access to viable internet connectivity and whatnot to have no business disruption, that's what companies look at too. So storm systems, weather patterns, the amount of precipitation, those types of things. How often does the market shut down and how often do flights get canceled? We see those on the criteria list, but again, the ones, availability, accessibility, cost.
Excellent. That's great to know. So let me switch quickly to Jillian. Question here around the cost of the BH-1B visa. Now, we don't have to get into the legal cost, but when you look at the fees that the government would charge, so we know there's both spousals visas as well as spouse and children, as well as the actual person who's working. So what are the relative costs associated with those visas from a government fee perspective?
Sure. So in terms of the applicant, the primary applicant, the person who's going to be working, the cost of their visa is $2,000. And for spouse and dependent children, it's $750.
Okay. Okay, so it's much lower. And I believe these costs are on par with the US's H-1B visa as well, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, great, excellent. And so the other question, we don't have much time, 3 minutes, but the other question I want to throw it out to, this is probably going to be an Ian Roll question. When you think about the cost of living in Freeport, Grand Bahama, as compared to the rest of the Bahamas, as compared to other places in the US, has the Grand Bahama Port Authority developed an index? Because many times you would see moving from one city to the next, there's always this cost index factor that's always created there. Has Grand Bahama developed that index when you look in context of the Bahamian dollar being on par with the US in terms of where its cost of living actually lies or ranks?
Yeah, so what we did in-house is we examined the cost of education, the cost of electricity, etc. In the US, yes, you have taxes. You don't have that here. So although someone might be paid a little more, like some of these workers, maybe, let's call it $100, just for this example. They may be paid $100 in the United States and paid maybe $70 in the Bahamas. But one, you do not pay that 30% or 20-something% tax, income tax. And then the tax that we do have is VAT, though, value added tax. But that's based on, you desire to consume, you have more control over that particular cost rather than income tax, right? And when you also weigh in on the lifestyle here in Grand Bahama compared to elsewhere, it's a very safe place, and the people are just a beautiful set of people. So the experience, when you compare our environment to other places in North America, when you capture all the costs, I believe that a worker would probably be better off in terms of lifestyle. And most persons are interested in a lifestyle, better quality lifestyle than even making a whole lot more money these days. I know I am.
All right, understood. Just a quick follow-up too. And when you think about rather Freeport, Grand Bahama, the Bahamas in general, in terms of our culture, our acceptance of other people's cultures, basically, how does that sort of mesh? And you always hear the U.S. use this term of a melting pot, right? We like to say conch salad in the Bahamas, right? Most people probably don't know the Bahamian. But how does everything mesh from a cultural perspective when you look at how we as Bahamians are accepting or we view foreigners that may come into the country?
Yeah, so of course, we always want persons who come in to add value to the environment, right? And this BH-1B work visa, for instance, is focusing on highly skilled individuals. And we're now focusing on the tech sector, but it could be any of the approved sectors under the Commercial Enterprise Act. What this would do is actually assist us with upskilling our local population. So we don't have that many skilled persons in the tech sector, but with the increase of this talent pool coming in and entities like Quest coming onshore, we are all encouraged now to develop the local talent pool, because it'll be cheaper also for the companies to develop the local talent rather than having to bring someone in and then they leave every 6 or 8 years. For consistency purposes, I think every employer would want local talent more so than even bringing the talent in the long run, right?
Right.
So I think Bahamians will embrace the fact that we are adding value to their life and to their education and their knowledge base by introducing this BH1B and encouraging non-Bahamians to come in.
Understood. That's great. Well, with that, we've essentially reached a minute over our time. I certainly thank everybody for participating, the attendees, of course, and obviously the panelists that are here as well. Thank you very much for your time. This has been a very great, very informative session. The question was asked for additional information. If you go to the Grand Bahama Port Authority's website, gbpa.com, you can find information about this particular webinar. This is being recorded. It'll be posted on Grand Bahama Port Authority's YouTube channel, and of course, linked to their website. And everybody who's registered will receive an email coming back, thanking them obviously for participation, but actually adding links to the additional information. So with that, thank you very much. We certainly appreciate your time and attention.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.